Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Breon Peace, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Today, we are announcing 3 impactful cases from my office in our nation's fight against the People's Republic of China's transnational repression activities. The first 2 criminal complaints that I am announcing shed further light on the extent of the PRC government's efforts to project its authoritarian worldview on the residents of this city and this country. The 2 complaints charge more than 30 officers with China's national police force, which is called the Ministry of Public Security, or the MPS, and 2 New York City residents with violations of U.S. law. Unlike typical officers, the MPS officers who have been charged today are not focused on preventing crime. Rather, the complaints charge these MPS officers with engaging in transnational repression schemes targeting members of the Chinese diaspora community in New York City and elsewhere in the United States. And as shown in these complaints, the MPS has repeatedly and flagrantly violated our nation's sovereignty, including by opening and operating a police station in the middle of New York City. The third case will be announced by Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General David Newman of the Department's National Security Division. Let me introduce the other speakers you'll hear from today. I'm joined by Michael Driscoll, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's New York Field Office, and David Sundberg, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's Washington Field Office, and of course, my Assistant U.S. Attorney team. 2 miles from our office, just across the Brooklyn Bridge, this nondescript office building down in Lower Manhattan has a dark secret. Until several months ago, an entire floor of this building hosted an undeclared police station of the Chinese National Police. Now just imagine the NYPD opening an undeclared secret police station in Beijing. It would be unthinkable. Here's what we know happened inside the secret police station in Lower Manhattan. At the very least, the station was providing some government services, like helping Chinese citizens renew their Chinese driver's licenses. But to do even that, the law requires that individuals like the defendants who act as agents of a foreign government give prior notice to the Attorney General before setting up shop in New York City. That didn't happen. More troubling, though, is the fact that the secret police station appears to have had a more sinister use. On at least one occasion, an official with the Chinese National Police directed one of the defendants, a U.S. citizen who worked at the secret police station, to help locate a pro-democracy activist of Chinese descent living in California. In other words, the Chinese National Police appear to have been using the station to track a U.S. resident on U.S. soil. The 2 defendants whose arrests we're announcing today destroyed evidence of their communications with the Chinese National Police when they learned of the FBI's investigation. These 2 defendants knew they had something to hide, and they obstructed justice in an attempt to prevent the FBI from learning the full extent of what they were up to. Before I go through the evidence in more detail, I'd like to say how proud I am of our office and the New York Field Office of the FBI, as we are the first law enforcement partners in the world to make arrests in connection with the Chinese government's overseas police stations. Now, the defendants, Liu Jianwang and Chen Jinping, were arrested earlier this morning at their homes in New York City. As alleged, the defendants worked together to establish an overseas police station in Manhattan's Chinatown on behalf of the Fuzhou branch of the Chinese government's National Police Force, the MPS. These defendants did China's bidding in secret while acting under the direction and control of an MPS official in China. Before helping to open the police station in early 2022, the defendant, Liu Jianwang, had a long-standing relationship of trust with PRC law enforcement, including the MPS. In 2018, Liu was enlisted in efforts to cause a purported Chinese fugitive to return to China. The victim of that effort reported that he was repeatedly harassed to return to China. That victim received threats of violence against his family in the United States, and MPS officers harassed the victim's family in China. Last October, FBI agents conducted a judicially authorized search of the secret police station and interviewed both Liu and Chun and seized their phones. In subsequent interviews with agents, Liu and Chun admitted that they had deleted communications with the MPS official from their phones after learning about the ongoing FBI investigation. Attorney General David Newman of the National Security Division to explain the details of and answer any questions regarding the third criminal complaint from my office, from which I am recused.
Thank you. I'm David Newman, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for National Security at the Department of Justice. Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson is attending to other matters in Washington today and could not be with us. I'd like to extend my thanks to U.S. Attorney Peace, to Assistant Director Driscoll, and Assistant Director Sundberg for welcoming me in his stead to address these cases. The trio of cases announced today details how the People's Republic of China, through its Ministry of Public Security, has engaged in a multi-front campaign to extend the reach and impacts of its authoritarian system into the United States and elsewhere around the world. It shows the PRC's efforts to globalize the oppressive tactics used domestically in China to silence dissent. Authoritarianism is a threat to democracy anywhere. The efforts of government of the PRC to export authoritarian methods to stifle free expression in the United States is a threat to America's democracy that we will not abide. Today's arrests and disruptions show that the Department of Justice is committed to using the rule of law to hold accountable authoritarian state actors who seek to threaten the integrity of American public discourse and the right to free expression that underpins our nation's values. And we are calling foul on conduct that should be out of bounds for any responsible nation-state actor. The MPS is seen as the Chinese government's principal national police authority, but the actual role of the MPS, as you just heard, is broader, extending to intelligence and national security operations far beyond China's borders, including the illicit transnational repression schemes that are the target of today's three actions. Across these cases, the multidimensional nature of the PRC's transnational repression playbook have played out in the charges we allege today. First, in the case you just heard, in the physical sense, the MPS established a concrete outpost, an off-books police station right here in New York City to monitor and intimidate dissidents and other critics of the PRC within one of the United States' most vibrant diaspora communities. The complaint alleges that on behalf of the MPS, 2 New Yorkers opened and operated that so-called police station starting in February 2022. Next, in the virtual sense, the threat from the PRC manifested as its agents and operatives sought to interfere with online gatherings, online organizing, and other social media critiques of the PRC regime, going so far as to conspire with an employee of a U.S.-based technology company to compromise the privacy of online virtual meetings, which were being used by attendees as a modern-day means of public protest and the exercise of freedom of assembly. This fact pattern, in the case I am announcing, underscores the insider threat risk facing any U.S. company that does business in China and has employees based in China. In the second complaint just unsealed, we have charged 34 defendants with conspiring to harass and threaten U.S.-based critics of the PRC regime. The 34 defendants are MPS officers who are members of the 912 Special Project Working Group. The group's officers post, monitor, and update content on various social media platforms that mirror and amplify the PRC-approved public messaging. Using false names, these fake accounts disseminate and amplify messages to manipulate public perception in favor of the PRC and to undermine and discredit perceived adversaries of the PRC, including the United States, as well as democracy generally. The MPS also uses these accounts to extend the PRC's reach, both online and off, in order to intimidate specific critics and dissidents. To that end, a third complaint unsealed today, the one I am announcing, amends and builds on prior complaints out of the Eastern District of New York and lays out how MPS officers targeted participants in virtual convenings hosted on the platform of a U.S. communications technology company. Participants included Chinese dissidents and critics of the regime based in the United States and around the world. As described in the amended complaint, the actions of the MPS officers had a chilling effect on meeting participants, some of whom had fled the PRC and knew the PRC was likely monitoring them from abroad. The complaint in that case also alleges that the MPS worked closely with another defendant to censor speech on the U.S. technology company's platform, including speech taking place here in the United States. As announced when the original complaint was filed in December 2020, that defendant was an employee of the U.S. technology company who was working at the time in China. We allege that the defendant removed content critical of the PRC, fabricated evidence of the terms of service violations in order to end virtual meetings critical of the PRC, and suspended and canceled user accounts that were critical of the PRC. Whether through these physical or virtual means, these crimes created real effects for victims in the United States, victims whose rights the Department of Justice is committed to protecting. As the National Security Division, my division, continues to pursue its strategy of countering nation-state threats, we want to emphasize that our efforts, including today's cases, are directed against the illicit actions of the PRC government and its agents, not the Chinese people, not the Chinese diaspora community in the United States, and not Americans of Chinese descent. In our work in this space, we have seen that victims of transnational repression in the United States are too often individuals who came to the United States precisely to benefit from the added protections that our Constitution and our laws provide against authoritarianism and tyranny.